Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 594 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's podcast features Rachel. Her husband has actually been on the show already, but she's the type 1. Intriguing, isn't it? While you're listening today, I'd like you to remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you're looking for the Diabetes Pro Tips series, it begins at episode 210 in your podcast player, or you can find it at juiceboxpodcast.com and diabetesprotip.com. If you're looking for community on Facebook, I suggest you try Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. It's a private Facebook group with over 18,000 people just like you talking about using insulin and living with diabetes. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Touched by Type 1. Learn more about them at touchedbytype1.org. They're also on Facebook and Instagram. Today's podcast is also sponsored by the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. You can find out more at contournext.com/juicebox. Use the most accurate meter I've ever held in my hand. Contour Next One.
So my name is Rachel. I am 26 years old. I live in the U.S. in South Carolina. I've been living with type 1 for 7 years now. And my husband has also been on the podcast.
He has been. Now, you ready for the fun story?
Sure.
So we met at the Georgia JDRF conference. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then later through emails and everything, we booked Quincy to be on the show, your husband. Except for the entirety of the time after the booking, up until a person's voice appeared on the recording, when I was like, hello, and Quincy said, hello, I thought you were Quincy.
That's hilarious.
And
what do you think, that just his name, or?
It was just the name. I just didn't, I meet a lot of people at those things. Yeah. And so I don't know why Quincy I was like, oh, Quincy, I mean, you have type 1 and he doesn't. Right. And you were very, may I say, I put words in your mouth. You were really excited to meet me.
So, I totally was. You can say that.
Okay. And so I just kind of thought, well, she must be the one that wants to come on the podcast.
Okay. Well, funny side of that story from my perspective is that, so I think you said something about like, oh, it'd be interesting to get your perspective, being married to somebody who has type 1 or whatever. And a lot of guys don't come on the show. And so that's why it made sense. But we walked away from that. And I looked at Quincy and he was like, are you mad that he asked me to come on the show? And I was like, you are so ridiculous. He's one of those people, like, he can do any sort of game and get it perfect on the first try. Like, these things just fall into his lap. And so I was just teasing him the whole time. And he was like, don't be mad.
Well,
it was really funny.
If it brings you any comfort, none of that's on purpose from my part. I think people who listen.
No, I didn't think so.
Yeah, I think people who listen long enough realize, like, wow, this doesn't seem at all odd that this happened. So so he pops on and, man's voice. And I'm like, that's not her. And then my brain, although it was not smart enough to coordinate the entire thing, my brain was quick enough to stop myself from going, hey, yo, you're not a girl. Like, I was like, hey, and he, I said, how are you, Quincy? And he said, good. And I went, okay, well, that's definitely him then.
Okay, we're going with it. That's
and
funny.
I pivoted on a dime. And then that's why when I got done, I said, hey, I'd really like to have your wife on at some point.
I'm here to set the record straight.
Please let him find this out listening to this recording?
I totally will.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that because it's not going to go up for months. It'll be like a year after he was on, and he'll hear this. And by the way, hey, Quincy, what's up? You have a girl's name? Kind of. I don't know. It's not a girl's name, is it?
He's heard everything with his name. Honestly, it's not that I've ever heard, but people say all sorts of things when they find out his name.
Allow me also to say for the 2021 millennial crowd, I know there are no girls and boys' names, and anybody can be named anything. And by the way, my daughter is named Arden, and that is heavily weighted as a male name. So
really? I had never heard it prior to listening to the show, and I really love it.
Thank you. There are not many of them. When we named her, there were slightly over 9,000 people named Arden in the country. And I think 60% of them were men, something
That's
like
hilarious.
that. And just for everybody's context, Quincy was on episode 410, and it's called Best Hug.
Yes.
And I don't remember why. But
because I think it was because I gave you a hug, and you were like, it seemed like she was hugging me because I had like really impacted her life, or she just gave like a really good hug.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember why. So that's interesting too for everyone out there. I don't know if you ever had a woman who's somebody else's wife hug you in public in front of the husband, but unless you've got that cuckold vibe, it feels very strange. And
Quincy he was like, nope, this makes absolute sense because the show really helped both of us. So he was like, nah, that's fine.
It's very cool. And I'm super happy you're here. And let us not talk of him ever again.
Okay.
Unless he comes up in the course of the conversation. Anyway, I was just 5 minutes ago explaining this to my wife. She's downstairs working. And if you could have saw the abject disappointment on her face that she married a guy who couldn't figure out who's who in a conversation.
That's okay. Now we get to pretend like it was completely on purpose. And when people listen to this, it'll just be full circle. We'll be like, oh, that guy's wife. Cool.
I looked at Kelly and I was like, listen, this is what it's like being in my head. I find it freeing. Don't judge me.
I love it.
Anyway, I was proud of myself back then for how quickly I was just like, okay. And just went right with it. And we had a great conversation after that. So
yeah, I was really proud of him when I listened to it. I was like, look at you.
Well, this is interesting. What was it like to hear your husband talk about your diabetes away from you?
It was really, at first I was nervous. I was like, what is he going to say? And but then when I listened, it was really sweet, like to hear it from his perspective without me there, like him feeling like he had to say a certain thing, Yeah.
No,
it was really, really sweet.
You were comforted by it then. It wasn't off-putting.
Yeah, no, it made me laugh. Like, because both of our perspectives have just changed so drastically, even since we got married. And so it was cool to hear him talk about the evolution of his thoughts around type 1 and in relation to me.
Well, how was your perspective changed?
Oh my goodness. Where do I even start? I was diagnosed at 19. So I was already kind of, a whole person living my life one way prior to getting diagnosed. And it just, the way in which I came to know type 1, it was just, like most people, the hospital just didn't do a great job explaining that you can even be successful with type 1. Mm-hmm. And so the show, when I found it, I had already been so beaten down with trying my best using hospital methods, no pre-bolusing, you don't touch your basal rate, so you don't do anything yourself. Your endo does it all kind of thing.
Yeah.
I had been so beaten down because I'm not a person that, just rolls over. I had tried really, really hard to make it work and to have good numbers, but I kept coming up with this frustrating, spike with every meal and then a crash later because I had no idea about pre-bolusing. Mm-hmm. And so I was so tired of diabetes, when I found the show. And someone told me about it and they were like, yeah, this guy, he talks about his daughter's diabetes and how he manages it. And she has normal A1Cs. And I laughed. I was like, that's not real. That's and then almost there was this anxiety in me because I was like, what if that is real? And what if I've been doing it wrong? What if there's a new way?
I'm fascinated by that space in that thought right there. I bring it up, I think, more than I should when I'm talking, but that idea of you've been doing something for so long in one way and your results aren't great, that changing is almost too painful, because then it's some sort of like
you have to try again.
Yeah, well, you this bright light on what you were doing before and how it wasn't working.
Yeah,
that part fascinates me. And the trying again and learning something new, I know how difficult that is, because a lot of people tell me, wrapped around diabetes. I actually just yesterday was talking to someone who I guess works at Omnipod. I guess I can say that. And they were talking about some campaigns that they're going to do this year, and they were getting my input about what I thought of them. And I said this exact thing. I said, I think you're missing that it is incredibly difficult for a person to take something that they feel like they understand, even if it's not working as well for them as they want it to. At least they understand it, and ask them to relearn something. I was like, I think there's much more of a leap in there than you think.
Yeah, I totally agree. So and it was hard to like relearn what I had already thought was impossible to do.
Yeah.
But so when I found the show, that's kind of the mindset that I was in. Like, diabetes is impossible. I try and I try. And I pretty much at that point I was on Omnipod. So at least I was on a pump. But I was just using, test strips. Like, I didn't use Dexcom.
Right.
Because it was too stressful for me to see the chaos going on when I had no way to control it.
I understand that.
When I didn't understand how to make it better.
Yeah, no, I understand that as well. Out of sight, out of mind is better than, hey, look, you're messing it up.
Exactly. So like occasional testing to be like, well, yep, still sucks. Cool. And then like moving on, was better for me than seeing the Dexcom graph where I was just constantly, woken up by alarms and annoyed by it. And I couldn't do anything to make it different. So the show, I think the very first episode I listened to, I know it was Jen had a pancreatectomy or whatever it is, where they remove the pancreas.
Yeah. I remember that one.
Yeah. Also, apologies to my dog. I can hear her.
That's fine. I mean, it's not being eaten by like a coyote or something, right?
No, she's just a puppy and really hates being alone. Oh. We just got her recently, so that's been a fun journey.
Yeah, starting to make all the mistakes. Great.
I know, we got a dog. Yeah. But anyway, I listened to that episode, and then I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I found the Bold with Insulin episode. And of course, that's the one where you talk about the methodology just kind of behind all of this. And I was like, what? This is a thing. Like, I'm going to try this. And so it changed my perspective about the ability to like win.
Oh, I'm glad. That's amazing. Yeah. Interesting side note, that episode that you heard first was going to have a completely different and weird title. And Jen stopped me. She's one of the only people that has ever been like, no, you can't name my episode that. And she strong-armed me, and I was like, okay. I felt like we were married. I was like, I'll do it. I'll fix it. I'm sorry. And to her, I want to say she was right. I had picked something ridiculous. But she had a kind of a Southern sensibility, and it rubbed her the wrong way.
That's so funny.
And I was like, okay, like, don't worry about it. She was so insistent. I could not have said no. She's like, well, what if we just call it something like what it is? And I was like, all right, well then that's
Listen, after everything she had been through, I feel like that makes sense.
100%. She gets a pass right away. Crazy story, But then you found episode 11. So did you go through some sort of social media to make that leap? Or how did you figure that out?
I'm trying to remember how I figured. I think I just started scrolling, and then, I know what it was. It was where you recapped episodes that were important on the podcast. It's like where you went back. I think it maybe was for the 100th episode.
Oh, I listened. Oh, I did basically. That's
You talked over old episodes.
It's because of my Laserdisc days. I did a director's cut of,
right.
We used to watch movies on, you don't know about any of this, you're fairly young, but movies used to come on these record-sized discs called Laserdiscs. And there was so much storage room on them that directors started watching their movies and telling you what they were thinking while they were making them. So instead of the audio from the movie playing, you'd hear the director's cut, you'd hear the director talking. And so for my 100th episode, I listened to Bold with Insulin. And then, so you would hear it, I would be listening, and then I would stop and sort of like add addendums to it, or like, oh, I didn't realize this. Here's how I think about it now. You found that one.
Yes, I found that one. And you're talking over it, to be honest, kind of annoyed me a little bit. I was like, wait, what is the original episode? And so finally I was like, okay, I'm going back. And I listened to that one. And then I started from the very beginning.
Being annoying is my signature move.
I'm sorry.
No. I think I get a lot of really wonderful reviews, but the only one that sticks in my head, it's so funny and weird. Like seriously, they're so touching. I want to just say I read them and I'm like almost brought to tears by many, many of them. But the only one that I can pretty much recite verbatim is, I love this podcast and hate that guy.
Oh my gosh.
And it just makes me so happy because it means that the information's so valuable,
right,
that even though I'm just assuming she really, really, really didn't like me, she had to listen anyway. And by the way, if that person's still listening, I think of you constantly and ha ha ha. So
I just think that's what it is. Yeah.
So
no, but it was just such a new concept. And so you interrupting it was like, wait, no, what was he originally trying to say? And then I was like, no, I should just be smart and go listen to the original. So
cool. So I tricked you. I got 2 downloads. Now, I have to say, in honesty, you hugged me like we were in a movie. You know what I mean? Like I was waiting for the camera to like pan around so it could get your face and my face and the same thing. And there's that moment where, so if you could try to understand that day, I get up early in the morning, I get dressed, I come downstairs, I'm, moving about. I meet Jenny for the very first time in person that day.
I remember that. That's so cool.
And then, I'm up on stage, I think for an hour or so. And then there's a very short break and Jenny comes into the room and we do another hour together. And then it turns into a meet and greet, which I don't know. Were you in the other rooms, right? For other stuff?
I had seen I think I saw the first talk you did because it was just Bold with Insulin. And then we went to one of Jenny's and then we came to the one where you guys talked together. And after that, we came up.
Did you do any after me?
I think so because they had Eric Tozer, I think it was.
I wish you wouldn't have said his name because I was going to say, do you notice how there's no meet and greets after most of them? So that's a weird thing because when I get done, then there's a line of people. And
I don't remember what was after it, honestly. I can't remember what.
No, it's fine. Eric probably doesn't listen and he's a nice guy. Don't worry about it. He'd be fine with this. So we're not talking about him. He understands the flow of conversation. But my point is only that like after a couple of hours of talking, you're mentally exhausted in a way that if you don't do that, you don't realize. And I'm not reciting anything. I'm just going off my head. And then you start talking to people and many of them are trying to tell you how important the podcast is to them. And it's tough. Like it's tough to stay. It's not tough to stay in the moment, but it's tough to remember everything. You stopped it for me. Like you hugged me and I thought, like I felt it, not the hug. I felt like, oh, I think I maybe have helped this person. Like, you know what I mean? Like it felt really good. What's the relief for you? Like, cause you traveled to be there. Why did you do that?
Yeah, that was actually our first type 1 event ever. And I came to it because I heard that you and Jenny were going to be there. And again, like my husband and I were just shifting the way in which we talked about type 1 together, how we thought about it. We were like, you know what, this would be good to do. Let's go. It's closer. Like, let's go do it. So we came, I guess, to see you guys, and to meet, because at that time too, I was, and I still am working with Jenny. And so I was going to meet her in person and I did. And so it was really sweet to like meet both of you that day.
Oh, that's cool. Were you were you there when I did the, like, how far people had come really long distances to be at that one?
Yes, that was insane. I can't remember the farthest one, but I remember being shocked.
Yeah. Do you remember thinking, wow, it wasn't me?
I don't know. It was just like, wow, people like really care about these things.
Well, that's sweet. I think it was me, but I mean,
it was you. Yes,
right. I'm seriously, I think we can go to other JDRF events, say, how far do people come? And no one's going to say, well, we've been driving there were people who were driving for like 6 hours. Like, am I remembering that right? Like some crazy.
Yeah. I mean, everyone we talked to, like just in passing, they were like, yeah, we're here for the Juicebox podcast.
Yeah.
Like,
they were there for Jenny. They were just trying to make me feel better, I think.
I don't know. It was funny. They're like, no, we're Juiceboxers. I was like, oh, that's a thing. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, by the way, until someone told me. I was like,
yeah.
Now there's a t-shirt now that I know it.
Right. Yeah. No. So I think the relief for me was just in, like I said, feeling like a failure for so long is really hard. Like, and being a person who really wants to do well, despite getting a diagnosis that is very, very challenging, and spending the first 5 years just like in a daze, like trying as hard as possible and not coming up with like results that I wanted, and being so, so confused that whenever I found your podcast and like used the principles and it started to work and my A1C lowered and my time in range increased and my life was more full because I wasn't panicking about like, what was happening to my body while it wasn't being taken care of. I mean, yeah, that's like all the relief you'll ever need. It's just like you see the person that, helped contribute to that. And you're just like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like,
yeah, no, it was lovely. It really was. I was touched. I was really touched by it. I mean, not touched enough to remember that, you're Rachel and not Quincy, but I'm joking. It was just, it's a lot. And then I have to get on a plane. And by the way, at that point, it was a little bit of that like, hey, people are starting to get sick all over the world vibe going on.
Yes,
too.
Like that was the last thing we went to, like the last in-person, like large event.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, I remember feeling like I maybe shouldn't be here. Like when it was happening. Although, there's this thing that happened yesterday. Omnipod made me the Potter of the month. I think it's just
I think I saw that. That's awesome.
It's a social media thing that they do, which is nice. But they, and I don't want to just, first of all, I don't want to breeze over it because I am really touched because I don't have diabetes. I thought it was a really wonderful a gift for them to say that. But my point of bringing it up wasn't just to point out that it happened, although I'll take that. It was that somebody I was very careful to read all of the comments, and there were more than 200 of them so far. And one of the people said that they were like lost and went to the conference in Georgia. So there was a person in that room who then, I mean, now it's a year or so later, who I just noticed for the very first time because of the Potter of the Month thing. Like I never would have known that person's story. They were just in that room, and I guess I said something that made sense to them, and it changed things for them. So it's very cool.
Thanks to me. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to know a little bit about, like you said you felt like a failure. So were you trying really hard and nothing was working, or did you eventually just give up and that's why it wasn't working?
I was trying really hard and nothing was working. I've never been the type of person, I mean, granted, test strip testing, like we said, isn't very involved, but I've never been the person to just give up, even in burnout. Like, that's just not something I do. It's more of an emotional drag for me when I'm in burnout. Like, I'll care for myself, but I'm like pissed that I have to care for myself, like kind of a thing. So I was trying really hard. And I mean, it's just the similar story many people say, like when your care team doesn't have type 1, they care about you. They want you, most of them do anyway. They want to help you. But what can 3-month gap appointments do for you when they don't empower you to like make your own changes when it's like a daily disease?
Yeah.
Like, and they weren't talking about pre-bolusing. I had no idea how to adjust my basal rates. Like I would do it in the doctor's office. Like she would show me what to do, but she would tell me what to change them to. And I had no concept of why. So it made me feel reliant on them. And also I didn't trust them because I still had crappy blood sugars. So it was like such a like weird little trap that I felt like I was in. Yeah.
So they're telling you, listen, we're the only ones that can do this. And they weren't particularly good at it.
Yeah. And I would try, like, I mean, and I truly, like, I haven't had a doctor that I look back and go, oh, wow, they were awful. That's not the case. It's just with the information available and with, again, I mean, they have the luxury of not having type 1. They don't get it, like, as much as those of us who have it do. They would just give me the bare basic information and I would come in. I would even try to schedule at first, like more than 3-month appointments. And that's typical, like, I guess when you're first diagnosed, but even a few months past that, I was trying my hardest to understand. I would walk in there, I would have my, logbook or whatever. That's hilarious. I don't even know where those are at this point. But I was trying so hard, and they would just look at me so confused, like why I wasn't accepting that this is the way that it is.
Oh, so you were not you were kind of the problem, right? Because there's a way they do it. And
yeah, they're just like, no, this is normal. This is fine. It's fine if you go to 220 after a meal. It's completely fine. And I was like, well, I don't feel fine. And they're like, well, this is how it is.
I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this here. And I said it on an episode I recorded the other day. If you're a healthcare professional and you're telling people that, I believe that is malpractice, and shame on you.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
And it's like the doctor that I know would never want less care for their kids, like in any other circumstance. But they're taught to believe that it's okay. It's not that they are lying. It's that that's what they're taught to.
But you don't think that's what they would do in their own personal life?
Say what?
You don't believe that's what they would do in their personal life?
No, I don't think so. It's like if they could have a child that had it and see how that child felt at 220, after a meal, they would question it too.
Yeah. Okay. I'm following. I at first thought you were saying that they are telling you one thing but would do another. You're saying if they saw it close up, they would know that wasn't the case.
Yeah, they're just taught in the medical community, I think, that like, well, this is the best we can do.
Yeah.
Because like me, I mean, they just think, well, this is how it is.
Right. Well, it's not.
Can kill you,
right?
So we want to be careful.
I'm super glad that you found the podcast. I like you a lot. You have such a great vibe about you.
Thanks.
There's something really just lovely about you. It's why I was so disappointed when Quincy was your husband.
You're like, it's not her.
But I wanted the other one, I thought. He ended up being terrific, by the way, on the podcast. He really was good.
He is so well-spoken. He always surprises me. When we go to social events, I'm pretty social, but I let him step forward. I'm like, you take it.
You chew up this chit chat. I don't feel like doing this anyway.
Actually, whenever we were going to talk to you, he was like, okay, we got to go meet Scott. Like, do you want to do that? And I was like, yeah. And we go. And then all of a sudden I got so nervous and I was like, no, I am just another one of these people. He has so many people around him. I'm like so spatially aware and I don't like bothering people.
Uh-huh.
And so I started getting nervous. I was like, no, maybe we won't. And he was like, Rachel, we drove all this way. You have to. And I was like, okay.
Well, I'm very glad he did. And it's no bother. I enjoy meeting everybody. It's just hard to keep it all in your head later.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only thing. But no, the experience is amazing. It's really touching to hear from people. And it's sometimes they say something and you're like, oh, that's a good point. You know what I mean? Like, I never thought of that. I've also met a couple of people who are like, strange in a good way, and that's fun, and so there's a lot that goes on. Mostly I think a lot of people that are in the rooms that don't know what to expect when I'm talking, I think they leave a little like I don't know, are they maybe dumbstruck or all inspired or something? I'm not certain, but they walk out, you can see them just kind of looking in the back of their head and thinking to themselves like, this isn't anything that anybody's told me so far.
That's what I'm saying. I'm willing to bet it's the same, realization that washed over me when my friend told me about the podcast. It's like, wait, there's another way.
Yeah. You can see them nodding along when you're talking. Like you'll say like, have you ever noticed, whatever? And they go, oh my God. Yeah. Like you can see on their faces, like that thought.
Yeah. Like, especially when you do real life examples and you'll show a graph and you're like, has this ever happened to anybody? And everyone's like, well, yeah. Like, and you're like, and it doesn't work to do it the way, and you say it better than your doctors don't know what they're talking about. But,
I'm super polite. Yeah.
It doesn't work, to do it the traditional way. And everyone starts being like, they admit to it. They're like, no, it doesn't work.
A lady said to me one time, she goes, you said, does this ever happen to you? And she said, I thought, yes, every 3.5 hours.
Yes. Like, truly. Right. Like I go back and I'm like, no wonder. Like I would bolus as soon as I put food in my mouth.
Right.
No wonder I would go high as a kite and then crash down later and just be like, well, let's do it again. It's lunch now. Like, it's ridiculous.
How long did it take you to pull it all together?
Really 5 years, I swear. Like, I found the podcast 2019.
Okay.
Like towards the end. And so it was like, because I remember it was Thanksgiving and we were headed home. We have like a 3-hour drive to get to where our immediate family, some of them are. And so the friend had told me, it was a friend's husband who was actually asking me what being on Omnipod was like because he was about to switch pumps.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember which one he was using, but I am like Omnipod or die. Like,
yeah,
you would have to pry that out of my cold dead hands, like for me to switch pumps. But anyway, you can put the Omnipod ad here.
I actually don't have an Omnipod ad today, but omnipod.com/juicebox. The ad I have today is for the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. Now, this is the most accurate, reliable, easy to hold, easy to handle, easy to use blood glucose meter that I've ever touched or used in my entire life. It is the best one I've ever used. I'm thrilled that they're a sponsor. What you need to do is go to contournext.com/juicebox to see it for yourself and to learn more. The simple truth is that blood glucose meters are something that we're given, we're handed. Nobody asks us which one we want. And that's a shame. And it doesn't need to be that way. Contour Next One is the blood glucose meter that I would choose if I was given a choice. It's not the meter that my daughter's endocrinologist had sitting in a drawer or, a bunch in a closet, or it's just the one that, our practice likes this one or whatever reasoning they use. How about instead you get one that is easy to handle, easy to use, has a bright light, and if you want an app to attach to it, works with Android or iPhone. So this is a meter that you can dig down deep with your data, with that app, or you can just use it free of the app as a meter. It fits in your hand so well, or in your pocket or your purse or wherever you carry your diabetes supplies. And it has second chance test strips, which means you can go touch the blood, not quite get enough, and go back and get more without ruining the accuracy or the test strip. And that accuracy it's an industry standard. It's so good. contournext.com/juicebox. It's a webpage with so much information that when you leave there, you'll know for sure you want a Contour Next One. So head over now, make a decision. Don't be told what blood sugar meter to use. Actually decide for yourself. Before you go, head over to touchedbytype1.org. They're absolutely my favorite type 1 diabetes organization. So many programs and services for people living with type 1, and all they want is for you to check them out at touchedbytype1.org. When you get there, there's a tab for programs where you'll see their conference, awareness campaign, Bowl for a Cause, their dance program, their Dancing for Diabetes show, their D-Box program. They do so much for people living with type 1 diabetes. You can also find them on Facebook and Instagram. But you should check out what they're doing at Touched by Type 1. I appreciate you listening to the ads, and now I'm going to get you back to Rachel.
Cold dead hands, like for me to switch pumps. But anyway, he was talking to me about it and I was telling him. And then at the end, he was like, you sound like somebody who would be interested in this podcast I listened to. He told me about it. I laughed and was like, no way. And then I told Quincy about it. And he was the one that was like, well, hey, we have a long drive. Let's listen. Let's see if it helps.
Yeah.
So really, Quincy is like a big part of this.
Yeah. Well, he's my hero in this scenario. That's for sure. I mean, because I can't imagine, I don't have context for being an adult with type 1, being approached by another adult with type 1 and being told you should listen to a third person who, guess what, doesn't have diabetes at all, isn't a doctor, and it's going to help you with your blood sugar. And I can't imagine not thinking that can't be right.
I definitely was sketched out a little bit. I was like, it's a podcast.
You can't step on that dog. It's
I'm
fragile.
going to strangle this dog.
No, don't say that on the podcast. She's joking.
Listen,
people love animals. Don't say that. She would never hurt the puppy. Tell people you would never hurt the puppy.
I would never hurt this puppy. This puppy literally has everything it could possibly need.
Well, it's a puppy. I mean,
It has a puppy.
if it's got water and like food, I think it has everything it possibly needs, right?
It really has everything it possibly needs.
It doesn't have your attention, though, apparently.
If it's okay with you, I might go stick her in the garage so she doesn't keep wailing.
Let's say the soft, beautiful room that you put the dogs in.
Okay. The insulated room that also has everything she needs.
Temperature controlled room. Go ahead. I'll stay here and keep myself busy.
Sorry, I'll be right back.
No, you're fine. Do you guys remember that time I left the couple alone to go help Arden with a bolus and they played music? Wasn't that crazy? Did you hear that? I don't know I have no idea what episode it was, or I would tell you. There are too many episodes now. I can't remember anything. Do you think she's going to kill that dog just to be on the podcast? She wouldn't. The dog's fine. No one worry. No dogs were harmed, as far as I know, in the making of this podcast episode. But let me tell you about Omnipod. The Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. I'm going to do an ad off the top of my head until she gets back. The Omnipod tubeless insulin pump is amazing. You actually right now may be eligible for a free 30-day trial of the Omnipod Dash. You'd find that out by going to omnipod.com/juicebox. Now you can type that URL into your browser or get it right there in your podcast app, right in the show notes. It's in there, or it's available at juiceboxpodcast.com. Now, why do you want a tubeless insulin pump? Well, that's easy. Constant basal, right? Everyone on a tube pump has to take their pump off to shower or bathe or swim. Not you. You have an Omnipod constantly working for you. You can have it on while you're playing soccer. You can have it on while you're carrying a dog to an undisclosed location. You can wear your Omnipod 24/7 and never be without your basal insulin. It's a big deal. Plus, there's no tubing. And because there's no tubing, there's no controller to connect to your body, right? Other pumps have an infusion set connected to a tube. The tube goes to some controller, and then that controller has to be clipped to your belt. I hear some people put it in their bras, down their pants, probably not in the front, pocket. It's this thing, and now you're connected to it. Plus, if you walk past like a doorknob, you could get the tubing caught on the doorknob and just rip it right out. None of that will happen with the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Now, when you head over, you put in just the tiniest bit of information. And when you're done, Omnipod will get right back to you, right? And if you're eligible for that free 30-day trial, well, guess what? Things are going to be looking up real quick. Where is Rachel?
I'm here.
Oh, God, Rachel, I just did an entire Omnipod ad waiting for you to come back.
I heard you. That was really, really well done.
Did I do a good job?
You did. I did not know. I mean, I know you do them live, but experiencing it was really good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, were you waiting for me to be finished, or were you just choking the last ounce of air out of that dog? Oh.
No, I heard you. I was like, oh, he's talking about tubing. I bet you it's the ad.
And just for clarity, the dog's alive and it's well, right?
Oh my goodness. She is doing just fine.
Excellent.
He's super sweet.
I don't want people thinking you sopranoed that dog so you could be on the podcast.
She may start up again, so people might hear how alive and well she is.
You didn't toss her off a boat?
No,
that's an actual Sopranos reference. And by the way, let me just say this now. If you haven't seen The Sopranos, I don't know what you're doing. Go to HBO Max right now. Start watching from the beginning. It's one of the best TV shows ever. Not the point of this conversation, though. Okay, so you diagnosed at, let me check my memory, 19?
Yep.
How old were you when I met you?
Oh, gosh. It would have been...
It's a year ago.
Yep.
Take your age and subtract 1 year.
But it feels like longer because of COVID.
Don't argue with math. Math is an absolute.
Yes, 1 year ago. So I was 25.
There you go. So you lived for 5 years your way, with the way that they gave you.
Yeah.
And then after you found the podcast, how long did it take you to just make the changes and see the results?
It was hard. I feel like it was about 6 months.
Oh, I think that seems short, but I understand that it wouldn't seem short to you.
No, and I also hit a huge patch of so working with Jenny, I could see, first of all, the first time she emailed me with suggestions on what to change and why, in all caps, why,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to cry. I was just like, this is what I've always ever wanted. Like, this is amazing. So fine tuning things, at first it went really well. And then so I say 6 months because it was like a special circumstance sort of thing. I actually hit this like really big patch of like insulin resistance for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And Jenny actually recommended that I switch insulins to see if that would help. So I went from Novolog to Humalog, which isn't like, I mean, everyone's biology is just so different,
right.
But it's not like a huge switch, but it was like night and day difference.
Oh, good.
It was awesome. And then I also came off of a medicine that I was taking, and that really, really helped as well. So that in combination, once that was done, then things were smoother, and pre-bolusing made all the sense, and I could fine tune my basals, and it was all great.
Yeah.
I mean, not perfect, but like
Better.
It made sense.
Yeah. Did you start with Jenny before me, or did you find Jenny through the podcast?
Through the podcast.
Oh, I don't get paid for that, but I should.
Yeah,
actually,
for real though. I was like,
way,
what is integrated diabetes?
Yeah.
And I looked at it, I was like, how have I never known about this? Like, I totally would have done this sooner. I was so ready to be like, there's something else.
I want to take my joke back for a second, because I am more than paid back with Jenny being on the podcast. So
She's exceptional.
Yeah, nobody has to pay me anything for that. Anything. Jenny's terrific. And she very much adds to the podcast. And I'm so now afraid that she heard me joke like that, because I don't want her to think that I think that, because I definitely don't. Anyway, that's cool. Like, it's amazing. How has all this changed your life? Like, seriously, is there a palatable difference? Like, palpable? It's palpable, right? Not palatable. Yeah, palatable. Yeah, palpable. Like, what can you point to?
So literally physically, A1Cs are down. I always hovered around in the 7s. And once again, my doctor was like, I mean, it could be lower, but this is fine. And now, my last A1C was 5.1, and my time in range was great. And I also just don't even stress about what I'm eating.
Yeah.
Like, I eat a very normal American diet, and I eat a salad. Like, I've heard you talk about Arden, and I'm kind of the same way. Like, I will eat a burger and fries for one meal, and then I'll eat a salad the next. And I just don't stress over it the way that I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think, I know I haven't been diagnosed with like an eating disorder, but once I confronted the way in which I manage my type 1, I realized that like a way in which I was trying to have control previous to the new way of managing was like limiting my carbs. Mm-hmm. Because I thought, and I had realized like, oh, it'll limit the spike, because it did. But that's so restrictive and so harmful, like in everyday life. It's just not a way to live personally. Like, if you want to eat that way and that's what you choose, that's one thing. But for me, it was like, I can't, because it will hurt me. And I just didn't even realize that, because I thought that's how it was. And so then once I realized, okay, once I understand how to use insulin, I can eat, within reason, like whatever I want, mm-hmm. This is great. Like, so it was better on just so many fronts. Like, I just had a lot less stress around managing and eating and living my life.
So that the low carb mafia doesn't come at you. You're not saying low carb is an eating disorder. You're saying limiting yourself for any reason could be.
Right. Just like restrictive thinking around foods. Right. Like, that's frustrating. Yeah. Like, no, I think if you're doing low carb on purpose and you're doing it intentionally and healthfully, or however you eat, like, that's completely fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But for me, it was like internal. Yeah. Like, I was telling myself, I cannot have this because my results will not be great. And that was so harmful for me.
Oh, it's amazing. How about burnout? You mentioned it earlier. Do you experience it as frequently now?
No, I definitely don't, because I think, so I've always said there's 2 phases, like, to being upset about type 1. The first one is just that you have it. And if you're diagnosed with it when you're younger, I feel like I hear it doesn't happen as much because you're used to it. But I guess everyone's super different. But for me, I have a clear memory of what it was like to not have it, and a clear memory of what it's like having it.
It's better not having diabetes, you're saying?
I mean, if I had to choose.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
guess.
So there's the phase of like what you hit at first, where you're just mad that you have it.
Sure.
And then there's the phase where, like what I was describing, that I think can cause burnout, where you're trying your absolute hardest, you're doing, your best, you're giving it your all, and you're still having terrible results and you feel terrible. That's burnout. Like,
okay. It's the whole
you're
thing.
giving it what you think, it needs, and it's not working.
So for you, you have the regular level of diabetes, just sucks having it.
Yeah.
And then there's the effort to take care of it. But then on top of that, you get the outcomes that don't match your hopes. And then the physical and mental stuff that comes along with that.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was a point where I was over the first phase where it's like, okay, I have this, I've accepted it, it's okay. And now I want to make it better and live my life. And I couldn't. Like, I mean, I could, but it just was, I had to ignore it pretty much.
So you were ignoring your health to live your life?
Pretty much, like ignoring the fact that I could not, and again, not ever not taking care of myself, but ignoring the thought that it could be better.
Okay.
Like pushing that down because it is the way that it is. The doctors say it's fine. I don't feel like it's fine, but it's going to make me crazy because I can't change it. So I'm just going to push it down. And that's why, again, when I found the podcast and someone talked to me about it, I was like, wait. Yeah. So I had to like dig it all back up, kind of a thing. It was almost like being diagnosed again, kind of.
Were you scared when you found the show that you were going to get your hopes up and it wasn't going to work? Or did you have,
exactly.
You did feel that way?
Yeah. I was like, this is just going to be another ride that another roller coaster ride where I try really hard, it doesn't work, and I get really frustrated and I have to push it all back down again.
Oh, I've never considered that before.
Yeah.
That's obvious now that you said it.
Yeah, so it was hard, and I was really skeptical at first. So I was like, I will listen to say that I listened, but then, bowl with insulin, as many people will say, it's just like, it's so true. It hits home. Like, everyone tells you to be so afraid of insulin, and I definitely was. Like, I remember, any bolus over 4 units made me a little freaked out. I was like, whoa. Because, when I was using it the way in which I was, yes, that was going to result in like a big time low.
I'm glad that
injecting it as I eat.
Yeah, that episode, it's that episode 11, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm so happy that turned out the way that it did, because I really genuinely did not know what I was doing back then. So that was just me kind of leaning on what I knew resonated from the blog for people. Yeah. And then mixed with my own feelings. But yeah, I guess I'm just looking back, like I'm your story is really great. I'm not making this about me, but I'm looking back for a second and hearing how it's helped you. And I'm fresh, very fresh, in 200 Facebook comments from people telling similar stories on that Omnipod post that I was telling you about. And it's hard not to think, like, what if I didn't do a good job on episode 11? Would none of this have happened for any of these people like this way? Do you know what I mean? Like, it makes it feel like in the moment you're doing it, you're like, oh, I hope this works. And then in hindsight, you're like, wow, I'm glad that worked, because now I'm aware of what there is to lose more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like writing the blog. I've said this before. Writing the blog, you get a handful of notes a month. Hey, this really helps me. Thank you. My A1C is better, blah, blah, blah. But with the podcast, reaching so many people in so many places, it happens all day long, constantly. And then you become, then I've become very aware of that. And so I'm suddenly thinking, like, thank God that past Scott got that right by mistake, because I definitely didn't do it on purpose. I wasn't very good at it back then, I don't think. As I say that, I realized that an hour and a half ago, an episode went up with a 14-year-old girl from Russia. And you have to listen to that one. Anyone who's listening, it's called From Russia with Sarcasm. So not only is this girl like my doppelganger, like I wanted to like adopt her, but which, by the way, she has parents. It's not like she was looking for adoption. But it's episode 487. if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly, she finds the podcast at 14 years old, educates herself on everything, driven by one thought. And that was that her belief was that if you had diabetes, you'd lose your limbs. So
Oh my gosh.
so at 14, she was like, I have to figure out how to keep my body parts. She found the podcast, educated herself, went to her parents, made them get her Omnipod and Dexcom, even though I believe they're not available where she lives. And
I was going to say, in some countries, like, that's a thing too.
Yeah.
Like, because they don't have good management, like, resources, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, no, but it's just that this girl she's astonishing and funny on top of all that.
Listen.
Yeah, she's really something else. And it just made me, so right now, she's the person I think of in this moment because it's fresh in my head, but it'll be somebody different in a week. And I'm very grateful that you found it. I don't know
too.
Yeah, so cool. It really is wonderful. You just don't expect something like this to happen. You would think that it would take a plan. You know what I mean? Not just a person going like, well, the blog worked. I wonder if I could make a podcast out of it. So.
No, I'm really glad that you did because it's definitely, it's accessible as a podcast and podcasts are super popular. And I don't know, I like going back to the beginning of the show and seeing how it transformed. I don't think you were bad at it then at all.
Oh, thank you.
You got different technology. I think,
sound better.
You learned like as you went. And I think it's really cool to watch the evolution of the show.
Oh, then everybody should binge the podcast.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Started episode 1 with Adam Lasher.
Yeah.
And I only remember that it's funny. That might be the only episode I know for certain what number it is. Maybe Bold with Insulin's 11, Adam Lasher's one. But I started off with this episode I had, and then I guess I can say it now that it's been 7 years ago. Like Adam Lasher was this musician who was on American Idol, had type 1 diabetes. And I think his uncle's Carlos Santana, if I'm remembering correctly. And anyway, I saw him on TV and I reached out to him, and I may have acted like the podcast was more than it was at that time.
Oh my goodness.
But the joke's on me now because everyone starts with episode 1.
Yeah.
So
it worked out.
It worked out for him at least. And it's the first time I was like, oh, talking to people is like cool. Because I had recorded a couple of standalone ones at that point. And I was like, oh, I like talking to people. This is a good idea.
Everyone has a different story, and it's really cool to hear. And that was like another thing that I so enjoyed was like people were talking about things that happened to me. And I had never, at that point, before encountering the podcast, it's not that I didn't have good community because my friends were very understanding, but none of them had type 1. And I didn't really know anybody who did.
Okay.
And I wasn't ashamed or embarrassed or any of the above. I just didn't know anybody who could relate to me. And listening to the podcast, people talking about the tech that I was using, new ideas, it made me care again. I was like, oh, there's like a whole group of people. And the Facebook group that you mentioned, that's exceptional. Like just the community and the fact that I've had circumstances happen where I had no one to go to. And you can now go to the Facebook group, type in a word. Like, let's say you want to take a new medication and you're worried like how it'll affect your diabetes. Understanding that it affects everyone differently, but I can type it in and find similar experiences where I can at least have an idea of what it might look like for my diabetes. And it's insane.
Can I tell you a story about the podcast, about the Facebook group that, so I'll do it quickly. My son is taking a gap semester, but he's a college baseball player. And he wanted to go to this place called Driveline Baseball in Washington to work out. So we had saved money not sending him to school, and it seemed like we could handle that. And we got him a day to start on. And then the housing that was available for the athletes was not available for the first week that he had to be there. So I didn't know what to do. And I went online just kind of looking for a hotel. It was expensive and I didn't it wasn't my choice to do that, but I was like, well, this is the only option, And I found stuff that it wasn't sketchy, but it was like, I couldn't it's so far away from me. I couldn't figure out what was the right decision. And so I went to the Facebook group and I just said, does anyone live around Kent, Washington? And maybe a dozen people answered me. And so at first I was like, well, that's weird. It made me want to post again, like pick a random town in another state and be like, does anyone live near here? Like, I'm like, how big is this podcast? Is how I was thinking about it. You know what I mean? But people came back and I recognized one of the respondents as somebody I had interviewed. Mm-hmm. And so because I had some comfort level with him, because I'd spoken to him for an hour, I messaged him and we spoke offline, you know, and we're on the phone together and I'm asking other questions. And during the conversation, he just says, you can just stay here.
Oh.
And I was like, what? And he goes, my house. You and your son could just stay at my house for the week. You can get him settled and then you can leave and he can go do what he's going to do. And I thought, and I was like, no, that doesn't make, like, no, like, thank you. That's very kind. But, and then he insisted a little bit and I said, okay, thanks. So we flew out to Washington State from New Jersey and landed in the evening on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Didn't get to his house till 11 p.m. Walked in. I immediately felt comfortable. He was comfortable.
Incredible.
It was really something. We spent 8 nights at his house. They made us food. We talked. It was a really like amazing experience. I got to watch like how the podcast helped his family. I got to see where they struggle. Like, I think I'm better. I'll be better at this now for being able to like be a fly on the wall in their life. You know what I mean? Yeah. But overall, it's stunning. Like, I was floored that somebody would say that. But
that's so cool.
Yeah. But I think that's what this whole thing has done.
I agree. I mean, I feel like I could ask anybody anything in that group. I mean, when you go through something like type 1, I don't believe, I mean, I'm sure there are, but like, I've never met anybody who's not a great person with type 1 or affected by it, because it just like forces you. I honestly, I don't even know what it is, but everyone's nice. And I
meet a lot of very
totally
kind
believe
people.
That story.
Yeah. I was really touched, but my point is that I've never imagined that in my life. And that's not something, like, you guys don't know me that well, but that is not something I would normally do. Like, when we were leaving, we're like sitting on the plane getting ready to leave. And Cole goes, hey, these people are going to kill us, right?
They put a tracker on us or something. They know where we are.
It was like, I don't think so.
That's hilarious.
I said, listen, and so I joked with them. I told them a couple days into the trip that's what he said. And they're like, no. And I was like, listen, if you aren't thinking the same thing, I don't know what's wrong with you. You should be thinking like, these two guys aren't going to kill us, are they? But it was lovely and very unexpected. It was wonderful.
Did you like, did they look at you for bolus suggestions when they did things, or like, how did that go?
I watched for a couple of days and I helped if somebody asked me. And then I think it was like day 3 where I was like, I really think we should change some of these basal rates.
Oh my gosh.
And like do some stuff. So I tried to help best I could. And even funnier, they used Jenny. So I was changing basal rates that Jenny set up. And that made me feel super awkward. I was like, I'm going to tell her that, but privately, I think. Like, they weren't like it. But you know what it showed me was that she had done a good job remotely of helping them.
Yeah.
But really being there and seeing it like live was, you could be more fine about it.
And she can only go off of like what people even tell her too, because I laugh at myself. Like, sometimes I won't have the bandwidth or the ability to go in and put all these notes in for her. And she still does a stellar job to be like, okay, it looks like you ate here. It looks like you did this. And she does fantastic for like being remote. But like you're saying, I mean, if you're there and they're like, hey, every time, you know, he walks a dog or like comes back in, like this happens, and she doesn't know that, it's like helpful to make a change. And I'm sure she'd be like right on.
Well, what I've learned from talking to people remotely is that they often don't know the things they need to tell you. And I've learned now that if they did, they might be able to make the decisions on their own. But it's like they don't know what's important sometimes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, it's incredibly common when I'm speaking to people, all the things they are direly telling you, they think these are the details that you're going to need to help them. I'm just like, I don't need it. That's not important, not important, not important, not important, not. Then I ask my questions, bang, 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 bang. And it might feel like, I don't know, it might feel cold, but I'm just like, I ask my questions and I'm like, all right, well, now here's what I think. And that's when you start explaining to them that, a lot of what you're seeing, like if you've ever heard me say on the podcast, people see a lot of ghosts and then make decisions, like, things they think are happening that aren't, or that are, that's real common when I talk to people the first time. They always think they know what's going wrong, but they're so in the weeds, they don't even realize it sometimes.
Yeah.
It's really something. Listen, have we missed anything? I just want to make sure, like, we're not wrapping up, but I want to make sure, like, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I don't think so, honestly. I'm just here to cheerlead the podcast. It's great.
Oh, well, no, this episode is dense with important information.
No, I mean, really though, but that's like the, summary of my story, I guess, is like, I'm so grateful that this information exists. And it just changed everything for me. And I'm grateful that I can live my life with a little bit freer headspace. Like, diabetes is there and I manage it. But it's just not a huge stressor. I mean, sometimes it is, because it is for everybody, like, random moments. But like overall, I don't see diabetes in my life. Like I see my life and diabetes is a facet of it because of this podcast. And I'm really grateful.
Do you think you'll feel a little less warmly towards me when 6 months from now this episode is called Not Quincy?
Or something about like the dog. That'll be hilarious.
I don't know. I'm pretty firm on Not Quincy.
No, I won't be upset at all. I give over control of the title.
Oh, thank you. I really do. They didn't let me make the title of my book.
What?
I wrote a book, and every word in that book I wrote except the title. They were like, "That's a marketing decision." I was like, "Okay."
I read your book. I like it.
Thank you. And then, but that's not the point. But thank you. The point is that every interview I had to give about that book, the first question was about the laundry.
How did you choose the title?
And no, they're like, so laundry's terrible, right? And I just started going like, that's not what it's about. I couldn't even tell the story anymore. I'm like, that's what a little bit of it's about. It's not like a smidge, and it's not even about anything. Like I'm not a real writer. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's, I don't know. I don't even know what to call that book. It's fun though, right?
It was really good. I liked it.
Touching in places. I hear people cry sometimes when they read
it. It was touching. I mean, just thinking about, I mean, of course the part that like I connected with was just like where you talked about Arden's diagnosis, but like I was older when I, experienced that. It made me ask my parents some questions. I was like, "Hey mom, did you ever like come in and try to test my blood sugar like in the middle of the night?" And she was like, "No, you wouldn't let me. You woke up like whenever I did it."
Well, you know what? That's really nice. First of all, that it made you talk to your mom and have some questions about it. But I don't know. I don't think of that as you're too young, I guess is what I want to say. Like for the parenting stuff, like it probably didn't hit you in the heart. Like I'm best suited to make ladies between like 35 and 48 cry. Like they're my sweet spot right there.
It was really sweet though, how you talked about family and life, like the way in which you saw Cole or Arden or just things your wife said to you. I don't have kids at this point. So like, yeah, what you're saying, it didn't hit me probably as squarely as it does some people, but the way in which you talk about it, I was like, oh my goodness, I can see that. Yeah. That's so sweet.
Well, maybe one day it'll feel differently to you. Like you were like a child bride basically, right? So you don't need to have babies yet. How old are you?
What?
You were like a child bride. Didn't you get married when you were like 12 or something like that?
No, okay. Definitely not.
How old? Okay. How long have you guys been married? I forget.
We've been married for 4 years.
Yeah. Well, you were 21 then when you got married.
22, but yeah, close.
That's how old Kelly was. And let me tell you something I know for certain. We were way too young to get married.
It's funny because Quincy's older than me. And so.
Oh, I know. Don't worry. That part I remember.
Yeah. But I feel like I had a pretty good head on my shoulders. I don't know.
Well, you did, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure we did too. It's not until hindsight when you look back and go,
you're like, wow, I was a child.
Oh my God, what was I doing?
No, yeah. It's funny to like see. I mean, we were only 4 years in, but I'm sure, like you're saying, I'll look back and be like, wow.
Yeah. No, I think we had Cole when Kelly was like, now look at me. I don't know. I'll do math for real quick. 74 is when my wife was born. Now Cole was born in 2000. So this should be pretty easy. My wife was 16 when she had a baby. No, hold on. 74, 84, 94, 2004. Now I went too far, but I only went. So Kelly was 26 maybe when we had a baby. Does that make sense?
Yep. That's how old I am now.
See? And are you ready to have a baby?
No.
No. That's exactly what I'm telling you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's all. And don't let this Quincy, he's got that like nice way about him. He'd be able to ease, like he got you to talk you into listening to the podcast. You right now might not even be doing anything you mean to be doing. He might be controlling the whole thing in some Svengali like way, which is a word there's no way you know.
I'm sure if you asked him, he would say it's the other way around.
Oh, it better be. I mean, you're the catch in this situation. I don't think that's a stretch, right? Do you know the word Svengali?
Yes.
Do you really? Good for you.
Yeah.
So how far I have like here are the scattered shot questions that are left from the hour that I didn't ask. How far of a drive was it from your house to the event in Georgia?
It was only a couple hours with Atlanta traffic.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, by the way, you people in Atlanta, I don't know what's up with that place, but build another road or ship some people out of there or something. But
I 100% let Quincy drive and covered my eyes. I was like, this is ridiculous.
This place is a mess. It's like a racetrack, but instead of but everybody has a different driving style because people are from like all over the country who live there.
Yes. It was ridiculous. So yeah, it was only a couple hours. But again, that was like the first JRF event I'd ever even been to, or type 1 event. Because before I was just like, that's not cool. I'm not going.
I have to tell you, I don't imagine I'll ever do one of those again.
Really?
Well, because first of all, COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And then secondly, JDRF significantly revamped how they do things on a local level. I mean, really? I don't know if they kept it quiet or not, but they fired a lot of people. I
did hear about that.
Yeah, when COVID happened. And if I'm being honest, it's a little bit of a heavy lift to get me to those events because I think the national office isn't thrilled with me talking about what I talk about. And so it's the local places that want me that kind of have to be willing to fight the fight to get me there, I guess.
See, I wonder if it's just because they partner with medical people, and if they go against what they say, then it feels wrong. I just think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know the reason why, but I would be surprised if I end up doing, unless there's some shift, in thinking, which isn't out of line, but it could definitely happen. But I just think, I also think at this point, I have I have an avenue to reach so many more people, but I just love being where there's so many newly diagnosed people, because it feels like an opportunity to save them from what you described earlier,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. We'll see. Although the flying around part, I do not miss.
Really? I can understand that.
It's not like real travel. You don't get to stay anywhere or see anything. Like the most I saw of Atlanta was leaving that hotel and walking to the train station to get to the airport.
This is Atlanta.
Yeah, this is Atlanta. That's exactly right. It's me trying to feed, I forget what it was. I had to get all these coins to get onto some train thing. I still have some of the coins. It was very irritating.
No. Yeah, I'm sure, because it's just so fast paced. It's just overwhelming.
I wouldn't take an Uber. I'm not anti-Uber. I'm old. Yeah. And I don't want a stranger driving me around in their car.
Anytime I have ever done it, I'm scared every time. I'm like, I wonder if this one is going to be a psycho.
That's how I felt when I got to those people's houses. I was like, I wonder how this is going to go. But I didn't really feel that way. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's great. I seriously am. It's just I'm an adult, and it feels like something adults don't do. But I guess that's not even right. It's just, I'm just old, and I don't want to change how I do things. I would like a taxi. I want to know who to blame when it goes wrong. Okay.
Right. I want to call the company. Yeah.
I want a company to sue. Your taxi guy touched me weird. I don't know. Does that happen? I hope that doesn't happen. Jeez.
I hope not. Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine? No, that would be terrible. Okay. All right. So we've done a great job here. By mostly I mean you. And I really enjoyed talking to you again. It was really nice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm glad you got Quincy and I confused, and I'm glad that I could come on to share my side, but I'm glad he also got to be on.
I am too. I really am. And I was going to say something, but now I'm not going to say it because it feels wrong. So we're done. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
No. A huge thanks to Rachel for coming on the show and sharing her story with us, and a nice remembrance of Quincy. I'd like to thank Touched by Type 1 for their support and remind you to go to touchedbytype1.org and find them on Instagram and Facebook. I also want to thank the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. Head over to contournext.com/juicebox to learn more. The Contour Next One may be cheaper in cash than you're paying right now through your insurance. That's interesting, isn't it? There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to these and all of the sponsors. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.